some of the public speaking advice that you got was wrong. For example, that you should end your presentation with a call to action. In this video, I'm going to list 5 public speaking tips that I used to believe in, but I've changed my mind on all of them. And I'm going to show you what you can do instead. Let's go.
For your next act, Mr. Markus Seppala.
How's it going? My name is Markus Seppala. I'm a stand-up comedian and TEDx speaker helping you bring more fun to the corporate stage. On this channel, I share a lot of public speaking tips about how you can better engage with your audience, whether that's in a comedy club or in a professional presentation. I've been doing public speaking since 2007, and that means that I've listened to a lot of public speaking advice and I've also given out a lot of public speaking advice. But some of it I've learned later on isn't actually good advice at all, and that's the topic of this video. So I'm going to list the 5 tips that I used to believe in, and then I'm going to show you what you can do instead. At any point in the video, have a look in the description below. I have links to additional resources that are going to help you, including my free video conferencing checklist that you can download. Before we begin, let me say a few words about the kinds of speaking situations that have helped me refine my advice over the last 10 years. I started doing public speaking in Toastmasters International, which is a well-known organization for building your public speaking skills. After that, through the course of my career, I did more technical presentations about my area of expertise, which is executive compensation. About 3 years ago, I started doing stand-up comedy, and as I moved into producing stand-up comedy, I got more comfortable with communication on video. And in the last 6 months or so, I focused more on online video, YouTube, live streams, and video conferencing. And all these different modes of communication have given me new insights to some of the public speaking tips that I used to believe in before. The first public speaking tip that I no longer believe is that it's a good idea to start your presentation with a question. This is something that I'm sure you've heard before, but asking a question at the top of your presentation is problematic for a number of reasons. Firstly, sometimes you're not sure if the audience will understand whether it's a rhetorical question or if you actually expect an answer, and if you as the speaker are also not sure, then you're really in trouble. Secondly, when you open with a question, it can come across as you asking for permission to do the speech. When you're on stage, you should never ask for permission. Rather, you should stay confident and focused on your message. And thirdly, I've seen so many bad examples of opening with a question in these online meetings. For example, can you hear me? For example, can you see my slides? When you open with a question like that, you are immediately losing your confidence. So I've come to believe that rather than a question, it's better to open with a strong statement or a clear indication of what is the value that you're offering and what is the reason for the people to continue to listen to your presentation. Tip number 2 that I used to believe in was that if you ask a question to the audience, then you have to know what to do with the answer. And this is something that I still believe in for face-to-face meetings, but in online meetings I've realized that it's actually much more important to get the audience to do something rather than what you do with the answer. And here's an example and a good practice for live streams and online meetings. You might ask, for example, let me know in the chat where you're joining us from. That's a good question because it creates some engagement and it makes the audience do something, but you as the host, you don't actually have to do anything with that information. But the next level insight is that the answers from the audience, they're actually not that relevant for you as the speaker, but they are interesting for the other audience members because the other audience members are also interested in where is everybody else from. So even though you may not do anything with the answer, so long as the audience gets something out of it, it's perfectly okay to ask those kinds of questions. I actually have a whole workshop about how to ask questions to the audience. I'm going to link to it in the description below as well as in the YouTube card here above me. Hit like if you got some value out of this video so far. Public speaking tip number 3 that I used to believe in was that ums and ahs and these other kind of filler words are important. This is definitely part of the Toastmasters experience because in every meeting somebody is there counting your ums and ahs and other crutch words that you're using. But I've learned quite recently that they're actually not that important. And this is something that I learned from the TEDx talks that I did and also from stand-up comedy. What's actually much more important is that you speak naturally. And if you have a couple of ums and ahs in your natural speech pattern, that is not going to ruin the day for anybody. Rather than worry about your ums and ahs, it's much more important to engage with your audience. And the best way to engage with your audience is to be natural on stage. Public speaking tip number 4 that I used to believe in is that you should use slides in online meetings. But after going through countless online meetings with terrible slides, I have definitely changed my view on this one. The main problem with slides in online meetings like Zoom calls is that they take up the whole screen. I actually have a whole video about how to use slides correctly in online meetings. I'm going to link to that in the description as well as in the YouTube card here above me. Rather than relying on slides, make sure that your storytelling is on point. Make sure that you have interesting questions to the audience, and make sure that you can express your message in spoken words rather than relying on your slides. I'm going to jump over to tip number 5 in just a moment, and I'm going to add a bonus tip for you as well. But if you got some value out of this video so far, hit the like button. And if you want more public speaking tips like this, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Public speaking tip number 5 that I've changed my mind on is this idea that I mentioned at the beginning, that you should end your presentation with a call to action. What I've learned recently is that you should actually have multiple calls to action throughout your presentation. Here are just a few examples from different communication situations. At the beginning of my comedy show, I may say something like, guys, give yourself a big round of applause for being here tonight. So that's a call to action at the very beginning of the show. In the middle of my performance, I might ask something to the audience like, raise your hand if you've ever been to a comedy club before. So that's a call to action in the middle of the presentation. In these YouTube videos, I also have calls to action in the middle of it. For example, when I ask you to like the video or subscribe to my channel for more tips like this. And then we have the example from before, where you're on a Zoom call or live stream and you're asking the audience to type in the chat where you're from. So you can actually have these calls to action at multiple times in the presentation, and I personally find that this is extra important in online meetings, where it's more important for you to engage the audience and re-engage the audience multiple times during the show. Now let's move on to the bonus tip that I mentioned, and this is more about your mindset. Public speaking these days is not so much about delivering a presentation, it's much more about engaging your audience. And that also means that you have to work a little bit harder to make sure that the audience is actually paying attention to you, especially when you're presenting online. And when it comes to engaging your audience, you should try to learn from these different modes of communication to see what works in your particular situation. For me, the alternative modes of communication that have been really helpful have been comedy, TEDx talks, and online communication. For you, it may be theater or improv, it may be an investor presentation or a panel discussion. Whenever you engage in different modes of communication, make sure that you learn something, and especially about how those different formats engage the audience. And always make sure to challenge the public speaking advice that you heard before. And here's my question to you. What public speaking advice have you changed your mind on? Let me know in the comment. What was it that made you change your mind? For more unusual communication advice, check out my workshop series, Leadership Lessons from the Comedy Club. In that workshop series, we look at what can companies and corporate presenters learn from comedians. Check out the playlist on the screen now, where I have a number of those workshops available right here on YouTube. If you want more public speaking tips like this, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Also remember to grab the free video conferencing checklist link in the description. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.